Good afternoon and welcome to the Armchair Monologues. And this is a video I've wanted to do again for a while, which is the difference between right-wing protesters and left-wing protesters. So first, I'll give you a metaphor which works, which is that a right-wing protester is going to knock on your door, stab you in the chest, and probably have a neck tattoo or a face tattoo to identify what right-wing supremacy group they belong to. A left-wing activist is going to be subtle. They're going to get in through the back door with a story of why they had to get in. They've cooked a beautiful meal, and as you sit down to eat it, halfway through you get stabbed in the back. What's the difference? The right are just more direct. But think about the proportion of left-wing protests in Western civilization, Europe and the USA and the UK. Think about the proportion of left-wing pro-Palestine marches and activists and BLM and Antifa and the Summer of Love, those horrible riots all over America, over a drug-riddled guy who, if he'd not been stopped, he might have gone on to kill a family. It's a shame he died, but he doesn't deserve a martyrdom that they gave him. And it was just an excuse for them to loot and do whatever they want, because our kids have been brought up with radical left-wing thinking. They've been indoctrinated to think of hateful things about America, about Jews. All of a sudden, on October the 6th, there were much less anti-Semites than there were on October the 7th. And I was amazed to see the first anti-Israel protest on October the 7th before Israel had responded. And every day since then. In New York, there's been one every day since then, after multiple pro-Palestine protests. And then I look at the right-wing protests, and almost verbatim, they're either about a huge flood of immigration into their country, or they're about being fed up with basically pandering to the far left and their disastrous woke ideology, which makes everything about them and their feelings and where they came from and how victimized they might have been now or in history, or even a mixture of both. It's an absurd reality of thinking. They haven't learnt history like the rest of us ever learnt history. They've learnt it as the thing to be most scared of, the most to denigrate the most, and therefore to never let happen again. No, we learn from history. Okay, I mean, it's a great example. George Bernard Shaw was part of the founding of RADA, the drama school in England, world famous. He has a couple of scholarships that come out of his financial estate still to this day. And there was a black man on a George Bernard Shaw scholarship protesting that his name be taken from the record because he owned slaves in a time when everybody owned slaves. And people don't realize this, but two things. One, there are 50 million slaves today, okay? And there's a huge African black-on-black slave market today, right now, as we're speaking. But the total amount of black slaves that were traded across the Atlantic and into America is 12.5 million. Slavery has been one of the top industries of the world since the Mesopotamian Empire, 4,500 years. So the idea that we can rewrite history would lead to the destruction of everything we hold dear and to be true and to be factual and to be good or bad, and a reference point for bad or good. I'm not going to say good and evil because, you can argue that as well. You can argue, but we need to know what evil was like to not repeat that kind of evil again. We need the history of Hitler and Stalin and Mao, and we need the history of Mandela. We need the history of Martin Luther King. We need the history of great thinkers like we've got Jordan Peterson today. We've got Douglas Murray is a great thinker. We need the history of the French Renaissance and the Enlightenment and the philosophy that came out of it, although some of it's quite dark. We need the history of psychology to understand how little we still know compared to what Freud and Jung left for us. So there's so much that we have to keep in our history in order that we don't go in the wrong direction. Now, Gen Z is the first generation that wants to go in the wrong direction, and it's shown in their literacy and their numerical and scientific skills. They are all down. They are officially the first generation to be more stupid than the one before it. That was never supposed to happen. That gradient has been going up since 4,500 years ago. Steadily, every generation's got more intelligent until this one, which was very poorly educated by a lot of far left wing teachers and professors. The whole academia in the Western world is quite corrupt. I mean, the top 5 donors to them are Qatar, the UAE, which is Qatar is part of, but Qatar's given us a substantial amount of tens of billions more. China, you think would be first, but it's third. Saudi Arabia, you can't trust them. Nobody knows what they're up to. And Iran. And if you're lucky, your local country, your actual government comes in 6th. That's been going on for about 20 years. And all of these things came with conditions of what could and could be taught. And they've brainwashed these kids into being hateful and to become anti-Semitic initially, then very pro the abolishment of Israel and all Jews. So now suddenly we have a protest group that's pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah. They just turned Veterans Day into Martyrs Day so they could mourn the dead terrorists who, if they met them face to face, would kill them instantly. And they have a massive overrepresentation of the LGBT community inside of these protest groups. I've heard of one that had 32%. That's very high. But I've heard of numbers, a whole load of them, 10 or more percent, which is not commensurate with the regular population. So there's something in that transmania world that connects with this protest world, because they've all been taught very radically and to think of the world through the lens of the oppressed, which makes you hate everything. And you add it in CRT, and then you basically give people the Marxist intersectionally victimhood triangle, work out where they fit, who victimizes who the most, therefore who's most victimized, who wins the oppression Olympics, and who's playing in the oppression Olympics. And obviously as a straight white male, I can't play in the oppression Olympics. I don't want to be a victim. But actually I've spent time in a foreign jail very uncomfortably because of the colour of my skin. I got a lot of bad things done to me. So don't talk to me about privilege, because it doesn't exist. It's a myth. It's something that was created by Joe Biden, actually, saying something stupid, and Robin DiAngelo writing a book she had no qualifications in. They were just her thoughts. So, left-wing activists, I'm sorry, you are really pissing everybody off. And that's why you get the counter-protest, which we've had 2 now in Britain. We will have more. And you don't want to piss off conservative men in Western Europe, UK, or America, because I guarantee you that a protester against somebody like me, I would take on 10 to 1. And I know all my friends would as well. So you've got, no one wants you to protest about Palestine anymore. No one gives a toss what you feel, because you've done it so badly. If you start a protest with attacking the police, it immediately becomes violence. It's not a protest if you start it with violence, you idiots. So anyway, that sums it up to me. Absolute bunch of completely manufactured ideologues who have no idea what they really believe and no idea who they truly hate. And when they come to the realization, they realize what they truly hate is themselves and their inability to try and live in the world. And I'll leave it on that note. It's been great talking to you. You be lucky this week. I'll be good. I'll speak to you soon.